The Last Patrol, 4 Soldiers Who Never Came Home. It was February 14th, 2019. While most Americans were celebrating Valentine's Day, 4 young men were preparing for what would be their final mission. This is their story. A story that never made national headlines. A story that most people will never hear, but it's a story that needs to be told. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, 29 years old, from San Francisco, California. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and was considering making the military his career. His wife Sarah was 8 months pregnant with their first child, a daughter they were going to name Emma. Michael would never get to hold her. Sergeant David Rodriguez, 31, from El Paso, Texas, the oldest of the group and the most experienced. He had grown up on the border, spoke fluent Spanish, and knew the desert like the back of his hand. His mother had begged him not to re-enlist, but David believed in the mission. He believed he was making a difference. Specialist James Parker, 24, from a small town in Ohio called Millfield, population 2,000. He had joined the Army right out of high school because college wasn't an option for his family financially. His younger brother looked up to him, wrote him letters every week. The last letter James wrote back was found in his pocket, unsealed, never sent. Private First Class Marcus Johnson, 21, from Detroit, Michigan, the youngest. He had been in country for only 4 months. This was supposed to be a routine patrol, a chance to get experience with the veterans. His father, also a veteran, had served in Desert Storm. Marcus wanted to make him proud. He did, but the cost was too high. The location was a remote outpost in southeastern Afghanistan near the Pakistan border. The area was known to be dangerous, but it had been quiet for weeks. Intelligence reports suggested minimal threat activity. Those reports were wrong. February 13th, 10 p.m. local time. The briefing was short. A standard night patrol, 8 hours. The objective was to check on a village called Karezi Mula, about 15 miles from the base, and assess the security situation. There had been reports of unusual activity, but nothing concrete, nothing that raised red flags. The patrol was designated Charlie 4. 4 men, 2 vehicles, standard equipment. Michael Chen gathered his team. He went through the checklist methodically, like he always did. Night vision goggles, check. Communication equipment, check. Medical supplies, check. Ammunition, check. He looked at his men and said something that everyone would remember later. He said, "Stay sharp out there. Something feels off tonight, but we're probably just being paranoid. Let's get this done and get back for breakfast." They rolled out at 11:30 p.m. 2 Humvees, lights off, moving through the darkness. The night was cold, unusually cold for that time of year. Temperature was around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert at night can be brutal. Marcus was driving the second vehicle. It was only his 3rd time on patrol. He was nervous, but trying not to show it. The first checkpoint was reached at 1:15 a.m. Everything was normal. David radioed back to base. "Charlie 4 to base, checkpoint Alpha, all clear." The radio operator acknowledged. David made a joke about the cold. Everyone in the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center, could hear the relief in his voice. They continued toward the village. The road was rough, barely a road at all in some places. Just dirt and rocks, winding through hills and small valleys. The landscape was barren, desolate, the kind of place where you could disappear and no one would ever find you. At 2:47 a.m., they reached checkpoint Bravo. Again, David reported in. "All clear, proceeding to objective." The voice on the other end said, "Copy that, Charlie 4. Stay safe out there." Those were the last words anyone at base would hear from them. At 3:33 a.m., the patrol was supposed to check in again. They didn't. The radio operator called them. No response. He tried again. Still nothing. Protocol said to wait 15 minutes before escalating. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. At 3:50 a.m., the TOC commander was notified. Lieutenant Colonel Richards had been in the Army for 18 years. He had seen situations like this before. Sometimes it was just equipment failure. Sometimes it was the terrain blocking the signal. But sometimes it was much worse. He ordered an immediate QRF, a quick reaction force, to prepare for deployment. But there was a problem. A massive dust storm had rolled in. Visibility was 0. Helicopters couldn't fly. Even ground vehicles would have trouble. At 4:30 a.m., the decision was made. They had to go. A team of 12 soldiers mounted up in 4 vehicles and headed out into the storm. The drive that should have taken an hour took 3. The wind was howling, sand blasting everything, the temperature dropping even further. At 7:52 a.m., just as the sun was beginning to rise and the storm was starting to clear, they found them. The scene was something that would haunt every member of that QRF for the rest of their lives. The first Humvee was on its side, 30 yards off the road, down an embankment. It looked like it had tried to evade something and rolled. The second Humvee was still on the road but riddled with bullet holes. The windshield was shattered. The doors were open. Specialist Parker was found first. He was 20 feet from the second vehicle, lying face down. He had tried to run. There were footprints in the sand showing his path. He had made it 20 feet before they cut him down. He had been shot 4 times in the back. His rifle was still in the vehicle. He never had a chance to use it. Private Johnson was found near the first Humvee. He had crawled out after the vehicle rolled. There was a blood trail showing where he had tried to move, tried to find cover. He made it behind a small rock formation. His radio was in his hand. He had been trying to call for help. The radio was damaged in the rollover. It wouldn't have worked anyway. He had been shot twice, once in the chest, once in the head. He was 21 years old. Sergeant Rodriguez was still in the driver's seat of the second Humvee. He never got out. The forensics would later show he was the first one hit, multiple rounds through the windshield. He died instantly, probably never even knew what happened. The vehicle was still in drive. His foot had slipped off the brake when he died, and it had rolled forward a few feet before stopping. Staff Sergeant Chen was found 45 yards from the vehicles behind a small hill. His rifle was beside him, and the bolt was locked back, empty. He had fired every round he had. There were 30 spent casings around his position. He had made a stand. He had tried to protect his men, tried to fight back. The Taliban fighters who ambushed them later said that one soldier had fought like a demon, that he had wounded 2 of their men before they finally brought him down. That was Michael. He had been shot 7 times, but he kept fighting until he physically couldn't anymore. His hand was still reaching for his sidearm when they found him. The investigation began immediately. Every inch of the scene was photographed, documented, analyzed. The forensic team found over 200 spent shell casings from enemy weapons. This wasn't a random attack. It was a coordinated ambush by at least 15 to 20 fighters. They had been waiting. The Humvee's onboard system showed what happened. At 3:29 a.m., both vehicles had stopped. Why? The tire tracks showed they had stopped deliberately, not suddenly. Something had made them stop. Later, witnesses from the village said that there had been what looked like a checkpoint, men in Afghan National Army uniforms flagging them down. It was a trap. The Taliban had set up a fake checkpoint. When the Americans stopped, the shooting started immediately. Sergeant Rodriguez was killed in the first seconds. The first Humvee, trying to escape, accelerated hard, but the terrain was treacherous. It rolled. Private Johnson was knocked unconscious in the roll. When he came to, he tried to call for help, but it was too late. Specialist Parker had been in the back of the second Humvee. When the shooting started, he jumped out and ran, probably hoping to flank the enemy or find cover. He didn't make it. Staff Sergeant Chen, in the passenger seat of the second vehicle, had returned fire immediately. He jumped out, used the vehicle for cover initially, then moved to a better position when he realized Rodriguez was dead. He fought for approximately 6 minutes before he was overwhelmed. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. 4 American soldiers against 20 Taliban fighters who had the element of surprise and superior positioning. The outcome was inevitable, but Michael Chen had made them pay for it. 2 Taliban fighters were found dead half a mile away. 2 others were wounded and captured later. Michael had done his job. He had fought to his last breath. The investigation also revealed failures. The intelligence about the area being low threat was outdated. There had been reports of Taliban movement in that area, but they hadn't been properly disseminated. The patrol should have had air support on standby. There should have been more vehicles. The fake checkpoint was a known Taliban tactic, and the soldiers should have been briefed about it more thoroughly. But hindsight is always perfect. In the moment, they had done what they were trained to do, and they paid the ultimate price. Back in the United States, 4 families were about to have their worlds destroyed. In San Francisco, at 8 a.m. Pacific time, there was a knock on Sarah Chen's door. She was making breakfast. She saw the 2 uniformed officers through the window, and her heart stopped. She knew before they even said a word. She collapsed. The baby inside her kicked, as if sensing her mother's anguish. Emma would be born 3 weeks later. She would grow up knowing her father only through photographs and stories. In El Paso, David Rodriguez's mother was watching the morning news when she saw the breaking story. 4 soldiers killed in Afghanistan. She called David's unit immediately, hoping, praying it wasn't him. The phone rang and rang. No answer. She knew. Her son, her oldest child, the one who always called her every Sunday without fail, was gone. She would never hear his voice again. In Millfield, Ohio, James Parker's family got the official notification at noon. His father, a factory worker, was at work. His mother was home with James's younger brother, Tyler. Tyler was the one who answered the door. He was 16 years old. When he saw the officers, he called for his mom and then sat down on the floor and cried. He had been planning to join the army like his brother. That plan changed that day. In Detroit, Marcus Johnson's father, a man who had served his country with pride and had encouraged his son to do the same, received the news and didn't speak for 2 days. He blamed himself. He had pushed Marcus toward military service. His wife had to sedate him. The guilt nearly killed him. He would carry it for the rest of his life. The bodies were flown home. 4 flag-draped caskets, 4 separate funerals in 4 different cities. Thousands of people attended. Strangers came to pay their respects. Patriot Guard riders lined the streets. The flag was folded and presented to the families. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your service. But words meant nothing. Words couldn't bring them back. The media covered the story for about 3 days. 4 soldiers killed in Afghanistan. It was mentioned on the evening news, written about in newspapers. But then the news cycle moved on. There was a political scandal, a celebrity divorce, a new crisis somewhere else. Charlie 4 was forgotten by most of America. Just another statistic in a war that had been going on for so long that most people had stopped paying attention. But not everyone forgot. At the outpost where they had been stationed, there's a memorial. 4 wooden crosses with helmets placed on top. 4 names: Michael Chin, David Rodriguez, James Parker, Marcus Johnson. Every soldier who passes by stops and salutes. Every patrol that goes out thinks about them. The spot where they died is marked on the maps now. Local Afghans put stones there, a traditional memorial. Even years later, soldiers on patrol in that area report seeing the stones, still maintained, still respected. The families tried to move on, but how do you move on from something like that? Sarah Chin raised Emma alone, telling her daughter every day about the hero who was her father. David's mother never stopped setting a place for him at the table on holidays. James's brother Tyler did eventually join the military, but he became a medic, dedicated to saving lives. Marcus's father started a foundation to help veterans, pouring his grief into helping others who had served. The investigation's findings led to changes. Intelligence sharing improved. Patrol protocols were updated. Fake checkpoint awareness became part of every briefing. It wouldn't bring Charlie 4 back, but maybe it would save the next patrol. That's what the families told themselves, that their sons, their husband, their brother didn't die for nothing. But on quiet nights, when Sarah Chin looks at her daughter who has Michael's eyes, when David's mother hears a song he used to love, when James's father sees a young man in uniform, when Marcus's dad sees kids playing basketball like Marcus used to, the pain comes back, fresh, raw, like it just happened yesterday. February 14th, 2019, Valentine's Day. A day of love for most Americans. A day of unspeakable loss for 4 families. 4 young men who put on the uniform, who believed in something bigger than themselves, who died doing their duty. Michael Chin never got to hold his daughter. David Rodriguez never got to retire and open that restaurant he always talked about. James Parker never got to finish the letter to his brother. Marcus Johnson never got to make his father proud in person, though he did more than words can express. This is their story. This is what happened to Charlie 4. They were sons, brothers, a husband, a father-to-be. They were Americans. They were soldiers. And they deserve to be remembered. Most people will never know their names. Most people will never hear this story. But it happened. They lived, they served, they died. And somewhere right now, there are other young men and women putting on the uniform, preparing for patrol, hoping they'll make it home. Remember Charlie 4. Remember all of them. The ones who went and never came back. The ones whose stories were never told. They were real. They mattered. And they should never be forgotten.